I would like to thank you for joining the 10th International Sabeel Conference. I do believe that you are here because injustice is here. I'm quoting Dr. King when he was criticized by his fellow clergymen for going to Birmingham, Alabama too early to challenge Mayor Connor at that time. And they criticized him for taking this step, and they described his step of being at Birmingham, Alabama as being unwise and untimely. And he responded by saying, I am here because injustice is here. I want to thank you for being here because injustice is here. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that's what Dr. King has taught us. In the coming 22 minutes, I will speak about the Palestinian spirit of liberation, which, in my view, it was replaced with what I call the necessity for individual survival. I will start by outlining the 4 pillars of liberation from a political standpoint. And then through these 4 pillars of liberation, I'm going to analyze the current state of Palestinian affairs and the relationship with the Israeli occupier. Let me start by the first pillar of liberation. First, inspirational, strong, and unified leadership. And currently we have an aging leadership and divided leadership. And I do believe achieving the great goal of liberation cannot be achieved without having an inspirational and unified leadership. The second pillar of liberation is a unified people. And Palestinian people today are more divided than any time in our history. The Palestinians are everywhere. The main form of separation and division is between the West Bank and Gaza, but that is not the only one. We have Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinians in Gaza who are disconnected, and I would like to make the distinction between a divide and a separation. There is also a separation between Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and those who live here in East Jerusalem. There is also the separation between Palestinians who live in these 3 areas and those who live inside the current border of the State of Israel. And there is also the separation and division between Palestinians inside the historical land of Palestine and outside. There is a division between the political parties. Divide is across the board. And I do believe we don't meet the second pillar of liberation as we continue to have ununified people, divided and separated, either by decision or by force by Israel. And we haven't had clear initiative to address the divide of the Palestinian people. During the first Intifada, the level of solidarity was high. The unity of the Palestinian people was high. And I will come to that point in just a minute to describe what happened after the first Intifada and connect it again with the 4 main pillars of liberation. The third pillar of liberation, again from political standpoint, is a clear and unified vision and strategy. And with a simple language I could describe that today we are lost. I travel to 40 countries, and every time I travel I meet with Palestinian diaspora, and we meet with our representatives in those countries. And the same message keeps being repeated, is where are we going? What do we want as a people? anymore? Can somebody give us a direction? Can somebody tell us what is now our policy on anything, for that matter? Do we agree on, do we want one state? Do we want two states? Do we want the status quo? Do we want a peaceful, non-violent resistance? Do we want an armed struggle? Do we need to go to the UN? Do we support the boycott? Do we support the BDS? And that is not clear. There is no unified strategy and a vision that mobilizes the entire population behind it. I teach at Birzeit University, and this is out of everything that Ernest have said, this is probably my favorite title as a adjunct professor at Birzeit University, and I enjoy it very much, going to meet with and lecture to the new generation of Palestinians. I've been teaching for 4 years, and every semester I ask the students to tell me what do they think the solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict should be. And for 4 years, I keep getting the same answers. And I can tell you that, to me, based on what I see, from my perspective, that the new generation has lost faith in the two-state solution. The new generation has lost faith in the international community. The new generation has lost faith in their leadership. They're not connected with the leadership. They're not connected with the political parties. And they are developing their own idea about Palestine and the solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. For that matter, the Israeli leadership is clear about that. I mean, if you read all of the statements coming out of the Israeli politicians, they are government members. There are many of them live in settlements. And they were very clear and vocal about their idea of the two-state solution. Clearly, they don't believe in the two-state solution. So, why should we? And that is one of the questions that we should answer as people and as leadership. Do we want the peaceful resistance to be our approach and our mean for gaining our liberation and freedom? I'm not sure. I would like to question the timing when the peace process came about. The peace process came at a time when Palestinians have reached, my view, their peak. There was a very strong movement going for liberation. There was an active participation from all parts of the Palestinian society into challenging challenging the occupation and defending our rights. The peace process came, in my view, to destroy a nation's will for freedom. I think it was a perfect idea to kill an entire movement and the solidarity of people going for freedom. Because I do believe in what Nelson Mandela has said. Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contract. And I think we continue to be prisoners, and I'm not sure how negotiation through an unbalanced peace process can deliver the Palestinian dream for liberation. We don't also have a clear vision about what to do with the Palestinian Authority. For some time, there has been debate about maybe we should dismantle the Palestinian Authority. Go back to the basics, go back to the PLO, try to organize ourselves that way. I don't think that very few people talk or debate anymore about whether we should dismantle the Palestinian Authority or not. So there is no clear vision, there is no clear strategy. I will not exaggerate if I say there are around 1.5 million Palestinians depend directly on the Palestinian Authority. We have 165,000 staff. We have 120,000 families who receive social welfare. Multiply that by 5. That would be close to 105 million people who benefit directly from the Palestinian Authority, let alone the ripple effect that goes into all the businesses etc., who really depend directly and indirectly on the Palestinian Authority. So nobody questions what form of government do we need, what form of structure for liberation do we need. Is it the Palestinian Authority, is it the PLO, or is it something else? When the peace process came, two things in my view happened that they were very detrimental. Number one is that people handed the struggle to the Palestinian Authority. Up until that moment, the first Intifada was run by the people. Every day on the streets, children, mothers, men and women, young people, older people. When the Palestinian Authority came, everybody felt now is the Palestinian Authority should take the role of resistance. So all the grassroots movements against the occupation for liberation, in a way, was weakened significantly. And of course, the Palestinian government, the new form of resistance, could not deliver. And we see that clearly today. Number two is with the peace process, there was one thing that is good that came actually, which was the parliament, what we call the Legislative Council. And that, in my view, one of the, perhaps the only good thing that came as a result of the peace process. And we killed it. And I think one of the positive things that came out of the peace process and the negotiation was the formation of the Palestinian Legislative Council, the parliament. And over the past 10 years, we paralyzed it and we killed it. So that all has contributed toward the loss of direction, the loss of trust, and the loss of vision and a clear strategy for liberation. Now, what do I think the solution or the strategy could be? First, we have the PA, Palestinian Authority. And probably I'm one of those who wrote publicly that probably we should dismantle the Palestinian Authority and go back to the PLO. I think it's probably now that we should just make the best use of it. I think we should focus inwards than outwards. I think we should focus on building and investing in the Palestinian internal front. And I think this is one of the things that we do the least on. We have been focusing on the occupation, what the international community could do to us. We've been moving into the direction of internationalizing the conflict, etc., etc. Well, that is good. While the people are being lost, being divided, we're not investing internally. We're not investing in building a strong society like we did, in my view, during the older times, especially during the times of the first Intifada. So first, I do believe we should focus internally, and we should invest now after all of these multiple failures. We should go back and focus on the Palestinian front internally. What is linked to that is we should prepare our people for a long-term struggle. I'm always optimistic, but I'm given the reality around us, I think we should be at least realistic. Under the current global changes, regional changes, the internal changes inside Israel, I'm not very optimistic that a solution will be achieved anytime soon. We're not preparing our people for that. And I think we should start preparing our people for a long-term struggle. Number three, I do believe in the power of the peaceful resistance, the power of the non-violent resistance. I think it's the only thing that could make us superior and defeat a strong army. Violence does not only kill the other side, it destroys who we are as human beings. We should not, and we will not allow violence to replace our sincere spirits of liberation. And I think that was the strength of the movement, I mean, in the US during the Dr. King's time. And I think we should also use the peaceful resistance, using any way that could be described under the umbrella of a peaceful resistance to fight the occupation and achieve our freedom. Dr. King also said constructive nonviolent tension is necessary for growth. It will help men rise from the dark of depth of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. And I do believe that we should make a clear decision and a strategy for the Palestinian Authority and for the PLO and for all of the Palestinian structure of politics and society to stand and to stand behind the non-violence resistance. I think it's not only that the balance of power is no-brainer, but also because it destroys who we are as human beings if we allow ourselves to resort to violence. Although we tried everything. We tried violence and it didn't work. We tried the peace process and it didn't work. We tried to go to the UN and it's barely working. So we are being squeezed. And I think this could be a danger for creating an environment that is conducive for using violence. We should try to avoid it at all costs. Number three, and here where I would like to start wrapping up, is we should start focusing on resilience. This is perhaps number three as how I see the way forward, is a resilience. So many people are talking about resilience right now, but resilience for liberation and not for survival. We have hundreds of small Palestinian communities in Area C, and they literally enter into an agreement with the great power of Israel, each one of them separately. Israel tries to frighten them, try to pressure them, try to sign agreements with a community of 140 people. The great state of Israel, they don't care, they just sign an agreement with a small community in Area C of 140 people, try to push them out, forced eviction, try to push them out. And so often the people of those communities, they feel they try to fight it individually. And that is also the danger, that we are losing the collective sense of fighting the occupation, and we're replacing it with the necessity of individual survival. And here when we talk about resilience, we should focus that we're talking about resilience for liberation and not resilience for survival. And that could be a very powerful tool that we could use and could be applicable in the Palestinian case. Let me just also close with some also few quotes here, and which some of you may have heard them before. I mean, I've been reading lately the Born a Crime book by Trevor Noah, and some of you may know him. He's the person who replaced on The Daily Show Jon Stewart. And he said in his book that in society we do horrible things to one another because we don't see the person it affects. We don't see their face. We don't see them as people, which was the whole reason the hoods was built in the first place, to keep the victims of apartheid out of sight and out of mind. Reading this, in comparison to the situation in South Africa, I think that is the same policy is being applied here with building the wall and with the segregation. Except that we're not only suffering from segregation, we're also suffering from apartheid, and that is also an added policy that Israel is using on a daily basis. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. For years now, this is a quote from Dr. King, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarities. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. And I think that's another parallel where we are always asked to wait. And I am afraid that has turned into a Palestinian strategy. Let's wait for the next American administration. And let's wait for the midterm elections. Well, let's wait to see what is going to happen in... So that is not only the Israeli policy, an international policy that Palestinians, well, you should wait. They forgot that we have been suffering for over 70 years. We've been waiting for 70 years. As African Americans have waited for 350 years until they got their freedom, and they kept asking them to wait. So we should create the urgency to end the occupation. Currently, Israel is running a 5-star occupation. They're not only not paying for it, they're tremendously benefiting from it, billions of dollars. I don't see why Israel should end the occupation. I do believe that we should make the occupation expensive. And that is, it's a basic physics. If you're comfortable under occupation, if the occupation is not costly, I don't see why Israel would end the occupation. And I do feel now that everybody is getting comfortable with the occupation. The international community, honestly, if the Americans are spending $250 million on a conflict with that magnitude, I think it's so easy to manage. Why should they try to deal with a situation where they have to even spend more money on it and take more risk? It's so cheap for everybody to manage this conflict. It's cheap for everybody, and it's profitable for the occupier. And I think if we need to address injustice truly and challenge ourselves with the need and the urgency to end the occupation, we must make the occupation expensive. And with that, I would like to close here. I would like to thank you all again for coming here, because I do believe you're following injustice. And I hope that you will have a great conference. What I wasn't introduced as today, Palestinians, we love titles. He said a long, flattering introduction about me, but I want to add one more, is that I have been on the board of Sabeel for a long time. And then I'm very proud to be on the board of Sabeel. I just recently stepped down for other colleagues, but I'm now still on the General Assembly of Sabeel. So I genuinely, on behalf of Sabeel, I also would like to thank you for being part of this great movement. Thank you.